Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Looking ahead, of course, to Saturday in Durban in that second test. Alan Quinn and Matt Williams alongside me, and as always, looking well, man. Guys, if we take a look just at this match on Saturday, and I come to you first, Alan. Hope, expectation this weekend compared to the result of last weekend. What gives you that belief, or does it not? Or am I being too positive in this, or do you feel Ireland have a real shot in the second test?
Yeah, I think they have a chance for sure. The thing we spoke about last week, post-match, was South Africa, I think, will be better as well, and they will probably learn a lot. And that's the great thing about back-to-back games. You see it in Europe a lot, in the old format, where you'd have those back-to-back games in December. And they were intriguing because one week you'd see a result where a team would be ultra-dominant, win by a big scoreline, and the following week you'd see a different results and a much tighter match. So I don't know if it won't have anything to do with this or any bearing in this game, but it's all down to the emotional kind of mental preparation and all that kind of stuff. I think South Africa would obviously be very relieved about getting that result last week, and they needed it so much. If Ireland had got something out of that game, it would have been a big hammer blow to the world champions. But we all predicted South Africa would win. It's such a difficult place to go to. They're a very well coached side, brilliant, and plus, coming off the back of the World Cup. So it doesn't get any different as regards the challenge this week. Maybe the only difference, and who knows, is the altitude. I played at altitude in 2004 in the first test in Bloemfontein, second test in Cape Town. I can't remember any sort of difference. I do, remember the altitude being really difficult, I suppose, particularly. But you don't really know when you're a player, because no matter what level you're playing at, if you're under pressure and the opposition are a good side and you don't have the ball a lot, it's hard to defend, and it does take it out of you. So the point here is I think Ireland will need to be a lot better, but I think there's certain parts of the game that they will look back on and think that they can fix. Their attack shape at times, they lost shape, and some of that pressure that South Africa put on is phenomenal. Matt mentioned a lot last week when we did the post-match pod about the kicking game and our wingers and full-back and winning those aerial battles. I think that's going to be very, very important again. So obviously you've no Dan Sheehan. He's a loss to any team. Kelleher is a really good player who will come into it. Rob Herring's another really good backup player. So we think Herring will start, or we think Kelleher will start and Herring will be on the bench. But I think Ireland one last push really, and they've if they sort out their attack and the kicking side of it, there's a lot of ifs when you play South Africa, and of course the set piece is something that, particularly that last scrum, after doing pretty well throughout the game, the set piece, that last penalty try was a bit of a hammer blow. So, I'm hopeful, but you never know what way this one is going to pan out, because I think South Africa they'll try and be better as well, and they'll try and be more ruthless when they get into those pressure zones again, like they did last week. Ireland defended superbly, and South Africa at times, I'm sure, would have been a little bit frustrated that they didn't get more scores.
Matt, South Africa have picked their team, an unchanged 23. Doesn't happen too much in international rugby. I see you hit the headlines again, Matt, but it's quite a nice luxury for a Rassie to be able to go unchanged, and they'll be hoping for more again on Saturday.
Yes, Stuart, I admire the way Rassie puts his team out nice and early in the week. It was interesting. I don't follow any of that stuff. I try not to listen to what other people say, so I don't get influenced. And I honestly don't read much of what other people write either, so I can just get my own thoughts. But I didn't have to, because everyone told me.
Must be nice, Matt. You don't read the stuff, but they listen to you. Good way of being, is it, Matt?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it's good. I was out for a walk down the park, actually. I don't have to worry about that crap anymore. That's someone else's problem. But, look, mate, that is what it is. And, look, again, like a lot of people, South African people upset. and if they had to listen to what I said, I don't blame Rassie at all. The coach does what he has to do to win the game. If he wants to pick a 7-1 or a 6-2, I've got no problems with Rassie. I admire Rassie's intellect. I said on the show last week how much I admire his rugby intellect. It's World Rugby that has to change it. The coach's job is to win next Saturday within the law of the game. Now, I don't agree with that law. It's not that I'm criticising Rassie or South Africa. I am criticising World Rugby for not changing it, and I won't stop from that. And I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone. I'm happy to talk about it. But to think that I'm having a go at Rassie is wrong. I believe it's unsafe, and I don't want to go into the whole thing again now. But I will write about it again in the Irish Times this weekend, because I deeply believe that this is not good for the game, because it discriminates against backs. So if you look at South Africa, the really interesting one about South Africa with this, Tony Brown, who's the new assistant coach at South Africa, and this is another point on Alan's talk about what will happen this week. South Africa will be better. They bedded in a whole new group of assistant coaches, and the way the structure of modern rugby or current rugby is the assistant coaches are the technical side. Your defence coach, your line-out coach, your scrum coach, your attack coach, and they have a kicking coach quite often, sometimes skills coach. So South Africa had a whole new staff. So they played like the way they did with the new staff, playing in a different way. Tony Brown is their attack coach. I coached against Tony when he was at Otago many years ago. I've watched him as a player and coach. He is an attack-minded player and an attack-minded coach. And I was really delighted to see the way South Africa played with the ball in hand, because I believe the South African side can play really good attack rugby, which is not good for the rest of the world. It's not good for us if they add that to their physicality. But I think it's good for the game, because to have your world champions playing a really great brand of rugby, I think is super important. And they played really well and differently. They were expansive. They were more. It wasn't just the kick over the top or the kick across field from Andre Pollard that we know is effective. But my God, it's awful rugby to watch. They played really attractive rugby. And they will do that again this week. They will be better this week. Jerry Flannery will learn from his first role as a line-out coach, where Ireland, even though Ireland turned over 3 line-outs, I thought South Africa gave them uncontested ball at the front far too easily. I don't believe that will happen this week. So if you look at those things, South Africa will be better. There is no doubt about that. What concerns me is the fatigue I saw in this Irish side. And their courage and their commitment is unquestionable. And we've learned at our peril to write them off, to say, they won't do this. When they went to Marseille last year, first game of the Six Nations, everyone said, the French internationals I spoke to on the sideline, everyone, this is going to be a close game, one try in it. At Marseille in the Velodrome, that iconic stadium, they come out and win 5-1. So we have to be very careful not to write them up. But their body language, their effort, they looked like tired workers there last Saturday. Now, I know at altitude that can have that effect on you because there's less oxygen in the air, but I am concerned that with the injuries and the breakthrough players, so you got Calvin Nash, McCarthy, and Jack Crowley. They've had a really big breakthrough season, all 3 of them, and they that looked tired. I thought Jack in particular was finding it difficult, as Quinny said, to get the shape going. And I thought he was a little flat at times. Look, it's easy for me on the cheap seats. Jack's still learning. But at the end of an exceptionally long year, I am concerned about Saturday when you weigh that up against the improvement of an unchanged Springbok side. I think it again looks pretty tough for Ireland.
Alan, Simon Easterby was out yesterday saying Ireland were a bit too passive in defence and they should have shut the space down. Easier said than done, mind, as you say, just sitting here speaking about it. But do you expect South Africa to play the same way again, and it's another layer on the Tony Brown attack system? Or could they surprise us and be even actually go back to being more direct? Or do you think, no, this is different South Africa and this is the way they're going?
I'd be surprised if they change dramatically, but we must remember, the direct approach of any team. If you want to get your forwards rumbling forward and being direct and making 1-out, 2-out carries from breakdowns, That's something that you don't have to replicate a lot. It's in the locker, and it's exceptional in the locker for South Africa. I do think that when we saw that variety and that bit of width in their game last week, it wasn't anything astronomical as regards mind-blowing kind of different way of playing. It was just really good execution, good connection, the pullback passes. They linked up pretty well, and obviously I've said this about Colby and Aronsah, if you can get the ball in their hands as quickly as possible. But what we did see is Khaleesi and Peter Steph Toy get their hands on the ball in the wider channels a lot. And so I don't think they're just going to go, oh, we're going to be direct here and not keep going. I think Ireland sorted themselves a little bit better defensively, particularly in the second half, where they numbered up better. And I suppose Simon has mentioned there about Ireland being a little bit passive. I think, well, for the Irons to try, I think Josh van der Fleer and some of the Irish team he came out of the line to try and get man and ball, and his inside players were a little bit compressed. So obviously, if one player like Josh van der Fleer, who's a brilliant defender, is coming out of the line, you need a couple of guys coming with him to make sure to cut off that passing channel and all that stuff. So. Yeah, I think you're going to be tested. You're going to be tested a lot defensively, and I think Ireland won't be naive to think that, well, we're just going to run side to side and defend South Africa in the wider channels, because they will still use their forwards up the middle and off breakdowns. But I don't think they'll go away from it, Stuart, to be honest, because...
I'm sorry, Alan. Is it as boring to say rugby, talk about the collisions? Like, if Ireland make better collisions, does that stop South Africa with their game plan and going wide?
Yeah, it does. I think if you can slow the ball down a little bit, it's much easier to defend against. So Ireland were actually quite good at the breakdown last week. They got, they had 8 turnovers won in the game, which is a high number for a team who've lost. Usually that stat would be with the winning side. South Africa had 2. That's what the stats tell us. So, of course, they've got to put pressure on their breakdown, and we're talking about improvements for Ireland, but South Africa look at that and want to be better as well. So, yes, it's exactly what every rugby team and every coach prepares to do. You want to slow the opposition down and unsettle their ball and not give them that quick presentation that they can, because line speed is something that. You can't create really good line speed off quick ball, because it's impossible. Or if the opposition are winning collisions, and I think, post contact meters from the stats last week were 192 meters for South Africa, but there were 216 meters for Ireland. So Ireland actually carried the ball quite well, and they were able to get over the gain line themselves a good bit. The challenge is how do you stop a team as powerful and as athletic and as dynamic as South Africa? It's a challenge. It requires inside and outside defenders making good calls. When one of their teammates is making a tackle, do I join in? Do I stop that and make it an impact tackle? Do I assist tackle? All that kind of stuff. So, and you have to be on it for 80 minutes. One kind of mistake and they'll wear you down. And Ireland did it pretty well last week. They were under a lot of pressure after half time in particular, and kind of hanging on at times, but they just defended so aggressively and manfully and put in a lot of good hits. So, you've got to try and do that as much as you can from the start of the game this weekend, because I think they would have been disappointed with the Aronsah try. It's an incredible step from him and kind of swerve, but did Jamie Osborne overcommit a little bit? Could Josh van der Fleer held his line back a little bit and actually gone quite passive and pushed him towards the touchline? So it's just making all these decisions under pressure. It's difficult, but and they've got to try and do it better this week.
Matt, we'll know the Irish team in a couple of hours' time, so the pod will probably just delivered before that or out in the public. But the changes we do know, or probably do know, is Conor Murray's going to come in for the unfortunate Craig Casey. And Shane's out as well. Keller's probably going to come in there, as Alan rightly mentioned. But Conor Murray's been around longer than me anyway, nearly you, Matt. But game plan stays the same. Yes, people say he's maybe a bit more controlled. Casey was very good last week, but how does that? Pretty basic question, but what can he add outside of his experience?
Well, his leadership and experience will be huge, and I don't think we should. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, Stewie. I don't think we should say outside that. It's what he brings. You know, you don't have Sexton, but you got Conor Murray, who's captain the Lions, coming on the field with all those tests under his belt, and the way he talks to his forwards, the way he sees, the way he can read the game. Where Craig Casey, who had a great game, and I'm not criticising Craig in any way, but he's starting out his career. The only way you get experience is by doing it, and he's going to bring that. And I think Connor's very aware that people say he slows the game down, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think his pass is as fast as Jamison Gibson Park, but I think apart from Antoine Dupont, no one else on the planet's pass is as fast as Jamison Gibson Park. But Connor brings a whole lot of other things, and especially around that area of the breakdown. Obviously, a beautiful box kicker, and so I think this will come in to the kicking game. We lost the aerial battle last week against South Africa. Our wingers were poor in the air, chasing and receiving, and the two tiny little South African wingers who are lightning fast but short, mate, they contested everything. They gave up, and that try that Colby scored when James Lowe flicked the ball in, that's a great example. And Connor will kick well. But the other thing Connor will do well is I thought they relied on Craig Casey's box kick to get out of trouble far too much. James Lowe had his worst game in a green jersey in many years, since his first stint when he was dropped and came back. James Lowe will get over that. We need his left boot to get him up the field. When Ireland play well, Lowe's left boot has a lot to do with the exiting of that. Now, I think it was a little bit of, I know that you know we're going to use James Lowe, so we're not going to use James Lowe, we'll use Craig. And it didn't really work. I'm not blaming Craig, but the variation wasn't there. So they've got to have James Lowe to get out of territory. The other one that I think will help is his relationship with Jack Crowley. As I said before, I think Jack wasn't varying his depth enough. The South Africans were racing up outside him, blocking off his pass. And when Ireland were pumping on the South African try line,
Matt, do you rate Jack Crowley? Do you rate Jack Crowley?
I think Jack is really, really well this year for a first-year player. But like to suggest Jack's got that jersey and it's going to be his for the next 5 years, no, I don't agree with that. And I hate saying this because I know he's a good player. I know he's trying his heart out, and I want to support him. But you're also asking me a question. Jack's missing too many kicks. He's kicking out on the floor, making errors with his kicks too often. And I think he needs to vary his depth as a 10. When Jack is good, he runs onto the ball, right? But if you run on the ball square every time, the opposition know that. So if you're running square, Ian Madigan sent me a great text today, Mads, if you're out there, about this very subject. If you're always running square as a 10, and we do want players to run square as a general rule, the opposition know and they'll cut you off. You know, he needs to vary his attack up. Sometimes go at 45 degrees to look for the inside pass, to do the slide out the back. Not always to be square and not to be in the same place. Sometimes you're flat, sometimes you need to be deeper, but every time you need to be running on the ball. As I said, there was one time there was a camera shot. Obviously, I wasn't in South Africa, but the camera shot had 14 South African players on their try line between the sideline and the first upright. So that means one pass away, there's only one defender. And Jack needed to get the ball that one pass away and couldn't because he was too flat. Do I rate him? Yes, I do rate him, but Jack is still learning his craft, as he should be. But he has to keep developing that craft and keep getting better. And I think people that are saying, oh, he's our 10, I think that's unfair on Jack. I think we have to challenge Jack and say, mate, you got it. And I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's that sort of young man. I only want him to get better. But he hasn't got his kicking off the tee where he needs to. He can get there, but he's just missing a few too many. It was interesting. I haven't got the number in front of me. I thought they said last Saturday was his 15th cap. That's usually around between 15 and 20 is when 10 start feeling comfortable. So it's so hard to adjust to the lack of time. South Africa 10, you get the ball and you get the player, and they deny you time and point of defence. But if he can get more comfortable in that, get variation into his play, as Ian Madigan suggested to me, which I thought was a great observation, he can get better. But he's not there yet, but nor should he be. And I think that when we compare him against Sexton, I mean, that's not fair. That's comparing a great against someone that's just starting out.
Interesting stuff. Another area of the game Ireland will certainly have to deal with is the bomb squad, Alan. And I suppose if you knew how to deal with that, you wouldn't be sitting here in this podcast. But what do you do all week to prepare for this? Like, any idea, Alan?
I don't know. You just mentally know it's coming, and you talk about it and you try and up your game as a player. I think obviously when six of them came on at that period of time last week, I think it was 50 minutes. It doesn't, like, anytime I can only speak from experience here. Anytime I've been on a field and substitutions have come on from the opposition, I've never really thought, God, that's a fresh man now and he's going to get one over me. Sometimes it's kind of given me a lift and said, I'm going to make sure now that, I make it difficult for them, because it's not always easy coming off the bench, and you're expected to make an impact. You're not warmed up at the same level. You don't have the same kind of adrenaline. So what do you do to prepare for it? Ireland just got to, unite and make sure that they can't overthink it. Like, you saw the South African front row on early last week, and Ireland, Ronan Keller was obviously on at half time, but the other two props are still making lots of positive contributions, Furlong and Porter. So, they're a team who have the luxury of being able to bring on players that genuinely, I feel aggrieved that they're not starting, if you like, and that they would start in the vast majority of other teams. They've so much depth in South Africa, and they've always have and been renowned for forward power and depth. So you've just got to kind of regroup and try and get another surge to deal with that. They're the trendsetters, really, aren't they, South Africa, with this, going back to the World Cup. The whole bomb squad word has come from South Africa and was so effective at the World Cup for them. So lots of other teams are, now put, what they've done to substitutions, Stuart. They've made a substitute now feel like that he has an important role.
But they do, don't they? They're a huge part of the game now.
Yeah, because you know what, I would have been on the bench a good bit for Ireland though, at times, and you end up sitting as a frustrated substitute, in a sense that, in times, years gone by, substitutes were ones that, in very simple terms, they weren't starters. Sometimes you didn't feel the exact same way as a starter. What South Africa have done now is have made substitutes trendy to be a substitute. You're now the one coming on that's going to finish the job, and that you're nearly the superstar player and one of the most important players. But look, they've utilised it very well, and Ireland will bring on their bench as well. And I thought Ireland's bench,
Matt also made them trendy, so he did all. Yeah,
the 7-1s and all that. But look, aside from that, it's something you just got to deal with. And you don't often see 5-6 players coming on in one go. I don't think I've ever seen it, but you've just got to deal with it. And Ireland have got to be mentally prepared. It's not something that's going to shock them mentally, because they probably expect it to happen again this week.
Matt, another talking point, a lot has been made, and maybe I'll get your take as well on later. When Peter O'Mahony went off, Caelan Doris was in speaking to the referee, and maybe they're saying that relationship wasn't quite as good, obviously, as Peter O'Mahony, because he's done it for years. Is that a skill? I think also Doris was saying he was still learning it, so it obviously is. But how do you see that as a captain, or developing into a leader, maybe if he does lead Ireland sooner rather than later, working with the referees? Or are we playing too much into this and it's all about the performance?
Stu, it's a great question. Let me just finish off on that last point with Alan. The game was never meant to play 2 packs of forwards in each half. And that's what South Africa are doing because they found that loophole. It's very smart, but it is not good for the game. It's not in the ethos of the game. The bomb squad, as they call them, which I think is a disgusting term, the replacements came on at the 48-minute mark. So that means 6 of the South African forwards played just over a half and the other 6 played just under a half. So they picked 2 packs. That's not what the game was meant. Now, in November, World Rugby are going to change or hopefully change some of this. And they've got to bring back some integrity into the game because the game wasn't meant to have 2 packs. That's just not what it was meant to do. And they have to bring it back into some sort of change because that was wrong. That is wrong for the game. It's wrong for backs. It's wrong for the balance of the game. And they're great players. Malcolm Marx coming off the bench is a great player. He'd start in any other team in the world. I actually mentioned him last week. First player, Marx on the bench, style pool and all that sort of stuff. And if you come back to what you were saying there about leadership and captaincy, John Eales, the great Australian captain, said something to me many years ago, which I've never, ever forgotten, and I tell every captain, captaincy is a skill you learn as you go forward. And Kalen is exactly right. You have to learn how to deal with your relationship with the referee and get your point across as best you can to the referee. Now Johnny Sexton could have a grumpy hat on because that's what Johnny was great at when he was captain. But Kalen's got to find his own style. But getting the referee offside is not great. Look, I thought that the referees and the TMOs had quite a poor job on Saturday. It's a difficult job, but there were a couple of things they should have done. We all know that. South Africa were the better team, not suggesting anything like that. I thought Kalen scored the try. I'll be right honest. But he wanted them to review it, and they reviewed it once. And he was saying, again, come on, again. Because he knew, he believed he touched the ball on the edge of the white line, which, of course, is a try. And he was trying to get that across. To be fair to Kalen, he said, I made a mistake. He's got to manage that relationship better, and he does. Because he was getting under the ref's skin. And once you get under the ref's skin, they're human beings, like us all, and they're not going to give you and they're not biased, but you could hear what the referee, the chat between the referee and the captain was like. I'm certainly glad they didn't have microphones in the old days. Some of the referees would tell you some things as well, where to go, but you were doing something they didn't like. But I think Kalen will develop into a very good captain. And that's a valuable lesson for him. And this is part of John Eales' advice to captains. It's a skill that you learn and develop. And I think he'll... Look, Brian O'Driscoll, his first game as captain, I was coaching him at Leinster. Brian came to me and said, I don't want to be captain. He was only 23 or something. I said, well, mate, you're going to be captain for the rest of your life. For the rest of your career, because you're the best player. You better get used to it. And he misspoke in his first couple. At the end of his career, Brian was a fabulous captain of the Lions. So, again, I think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup, to be honest with you, Stu. And that's what makes Kalen, to me, potentially a very good captain because he's publicly, I made a mistake, I've got to get better, I've got to learn. That's one of the first things about leadership is owning your decisions, owning your actions. I was actually really quite impressed when he said that this week.
Alan, I should have done more research on you. How many times did you captain? Not how many times or how many teams, or how did you get on with dealing with referees?
Terrible, Stuart.
You only saw the cards from me, Quinny. You only saw, was it yellow or red?
Yeah, but that was never his chat, Matt. That was never his chat. That's what he was doing elsewhere on the pitch.
Never got a red card. Never got a red card, Matt. Plenty yellows, all right.
Because you were that good. You were that good, mate. I've always told you were the captain.
Never got a red. I got suspended for a couple of sightings.
Gone in 60 seconds, Quinny, you told me once.
Never got a red. But look, captaincy is something that... you need to be able to speak, obviously, and pick your moments and get that respect back as well from the referees. But if you're screaming and shouting at a referee, no matter who they are, it's difficult. I always liked referees because my adrenaline and my kind of red mist would be circulating very quickly, and it was down to that kind of confrontational or that that emotional kind of madness, if you like, that I would have had and needed to be a player. It doesn't suit everybody. It's about being able to control your emotions in those heated moments, even if you feel your team is aggrieved and that a decision has gone against you, or you were, onside, but a referee pulled you for being offside. It's multi-layered and it's difficult. I captain Munster. I captain a lot of underage teams. I captained the Ireland under-18s, Munster under-18s, Munster 20s, things like that. But it wasn't that kind of, and all my club teams growing up. But I think when you get to the higher level, it was a job that didn't really suit me because I needed to concentrate and focus on myself. And the likes of Paul O'Connell and Anthony Foley and Dricko, Rog captain Munster a good few times, Mick Galway, Jim Williams, these players that I would have had, they had a great temperament about them and an ability to, kind of deal with that. I thought if there's too much stuff going on in my head, I have to look after myself. So anyway, enough about me, but I think I wasn't probably suited to being a captain on a regular basis. Probably as I got older, I felt maybe I could have, because, I would have learned from misdemeanors and how you deal with referees. I always respected referees, and every referee probably that I met after I retired, we always had a great relationship and a bit of a fondness, if you like, for each other. But I thought Caelan Doris, we obviously can't hear what Caelan Doris is saying, but some of those questions that he's asking Luke Pearce, particularly around Craig Casey and the RG Snyman tackle, he's making a point, and I can hear it, that when Tyke Byrne wins the ball in the line and pops it out to Casey, that there's a South African hand knocks that ball forward. Then he's making a point about the RG Snyman being offside, and he's really emphasising about the knock-on and the line-out, whether it's a knock-on or a slap down, so it potentially could be a penalty. I think then one of his players gets a bad injury, and then you hear that discussion of Luke Pearce becoming impatient with Caelan Doris, that he's asking him a lot of questions. Again, I thought that you've got to get your timing right. And Simon Easterby, someone who I played with, Simon was a very calm guy, and he comes across very calm in his press conferences as well. I think Ireland felt that he was not treated well, Caelan Doris. I think Luke Pearce is a very good referee.
And do you agree with that? Did you think he was treated a wee bit horsey?
Yes, I did, and I said it last week. And I think Luke Pearce, when he looks back on that and kind of analyses his own game, would probably not be, would look at some of the stuff that Caelan Doris was questioning about, legitimate stuff, and say, I could have handled it a little bit differently. I might be wrong, and I'd like to, I like Luke Pearce. I think he's a very good ref, and he's a very nice person, and he normally has a very calm demeanour. So I was quite surprised by it. Knowing Caelan Doris, he's not someone who's screaming and shouting in your face or using bad language or so I just thought it was a little bit weird. And listen, there was a situation, obviously, in that first test a couple of years ago. It was the first or second test with Nick Berry and Sia Khaleesi and Rassi talking about being disrespectful, to not having the same respect for Sia Khaleesi as he did for Alan Wynne-Jones. I just felt there was a little bit of this, that there was a little bit of, at that point in the game, South Africa were, Peter Steph de Toit was the one asking a lot of questions for South Africa, and I was just quite surprised that the same level of respect wasn't being given to Caelan Doris. He's quite entitled to ask those questions. He's the captain of the team, and his team, based on some of the decisions there, are not being, going against him. You can't get every decision in the game. And this isn't, I think it's misconstrued again a little bit in South Africa quite intelligently. Have, they put Jaco Piper up during the week for press, which is not really a common practice, is it, that you send your referee
2 weeks in a row as well? It's interesting. 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, and but look, they're right. They're the narrative that maybe is coming from this side, and some of the questions that we have asked, and other journalists and other sports people have asked, and other ex-rugby players, they're counteracting that with Jaco Piper, and they're saying, well, let's not try and let the referee for this week be influenced. I think the video clips and the feedback have come from both sides to the head of referees, and they would have got their feedback from with questions they've asked. It's not always satisfactory, and they don't always agree with coaches when they send in decisions. So, but I just thought that was, for me, that jumped out to me last week, irrespective of the result. I just thought the way he spoke and that relationship wasn't right, and there was something wrong there. And again, I'd be surprised if Caelan Doris, maybe it was repetitive questions, but when you look back at the video of the match, there were genuine gripes that Caelan Doris was entitled to ask about his team.
Okay, we'll bring it back
Can
to...
I just say
go
this?
ahead, Matt, quickly. Yeah.
I think, Alan, that's the point. I thought Caelan didn't pause to allow Luke to respond. He kept repeating the question. You could see Luke putting his hand up. And Easterby said that in his press conference. He needed a little bit of time. And I agree with you with Simon, who's a very calm guy, good guy. But again, I think that's a learning curve for a captain. Excuse me, sir, could you review that? I believe I scored a try. Can you review it, please?
It's a learning curve for captain and referee, Matt. So the referee needs to 100%. Say, right, okay, if this player is asking the same question 3 times, how do I speak a little bit? How do I calm him for a second? How do I say, just give me a second, Caelan, relax here. Okay, you've asked that. Like, I think both of them could learn from it. But look, again,
I agree with you. I agree with you.
It is a learning curve. It is a learning curve for Caelan Doris. I think he's an incredible player. He was outstanding last week, and he reminded everyone that he is world class, that he's a phenomenal player, and it is an extra responsibility. Being a captain is not an easy job away.
Lads, a final one on this Ireland-South Africa second test. We've talked about the South African attack. What about the Irish attack, Matt? They scored a couple of tries late on, and that first try was brilliant, obviously. Do you expect more from them in attack? Maybe it hasn't quite functioned. I know it's only been this one match we're basing it on, but even in the Six Nations, do you feel that area of the game has dropped off a little or not quite? Is that Jack still finding his feet, and as you say, talking about the depth, or in general? And how would Gary Ringrose, if he comes back in there, help to shore that up or make them look a wee bit sharper?
Yeah, it's a great question, Stu, isn't it? I think it's very interesting in the game. I believe that Ireland had a little bit of a theory about attacking the short side against South Africa. And that is something that has been around for many years against South African teams in their rushing defence. They tend to put their scrum half on the short side, and they are very compact and can leave holes, especially if they put their blindside winger back to cover in their backfield, as they often do. And I felt Ireland were trying to manipulate that, but couldn't quite get it working. I agree with you about Jack. Now let's roll back a bit. When you got Sexton there, he's the master of that attack. The attack that we see Ireland and Leinster play was basically designed around Sexton's abilities, and Jack is fitting into that. And I think certainly during the Six Nations, he did a very, very good job. Generally speaking, not perfect, but nor should we expect it to be perfect. We've got to keep our expectations real with Jack where he is in his development. But when you come up against South Africa, as we said earlier on, they just take away so much more time and space. You have less time for your decisions, and you've got to be far more accurate and fast in your passing. And I just think that little bit of a lack of accuracy, Jack's left to right maybe at times not as snappy as his right to left. And I also think if you've got someone like Ringrose there who's calling the shots out the back, a Mac Hansen also out the back really helps because he plays like an extra out half. All those things, I think, were when Ireland's attack was at its peak, they were happening. But again, then if we link that in, if we don't just say attack, if we say go forward, that's linked into a kicking game. And I thought a kicking game from 10 was not where it should be, and nor was our chasing game from 9 or 10. So you need a chasing game from you, and good kicking came to supplement your attacking game. So all of those areas I thought were not poor. Well, the chasing game was poor. We've got to say that. The chasing game from Ireland was poor. We lost the aerial battle. There's no doubt about that. But I didn't think it was disastrous against what South Africa will do to you. And I would like to see them come back at that short side. I do think South Africa have an Achilles heel on the short side. But you are not going to get down anywhere with South Africa if you're too flat and not moving onto the ball. You have to have your depth right because they are denying you that extra metre. You've got to buy that extra metre to get the second pass in with your depth. You can't accept the ball standing still. You've got to be moving. So your depth and your movement are really important, and they weren't where they have to be. That sounds so simple. And is the simple things done that can. South Africa put those simple things under massive pressure. That's what they do when they don't have the ball. That's why they're great at defending, because they put your skills under pressure and deny you time and space. There is adjustments to be made, and Ireland can make it. Look, all the things we just said here, and I actually thought Ireland played, and Quinn, I know Quinny doesn't agree with me, I thought they didn't play well compared to what they've done in the past. Not taking anything away from their courage. Their courage is just unquestionable. I really admire them. In their deep fatigue, which they are really courageous. They still could have won that game. They still could have won. I actually haven't seen any more replays from any more angles if Caelan Doris did score that try. I thought he did. They were within centimetres of winning that game. And if we come back, it was down the short side as well. When James Lowe's try was disallowed, which I thought was incredibly harsh, because they said Kelleher pushed the ball back with his knee. His knee definitely hit the ball. But that was an accident because he was in there getting the neck roll from LaRue. So I thought all of that was wrong, but they almost won it. That is where the positives are for Ireland. If they can get a few other things right and overcome their obvious fatigue for another 80 minutes, they got a shot at it. I don't think they can, but this team just keeps proving you wrong.
Alan, do Ireland have a performance in them on Saturday like they did in the World Cup where they beat South Africa? Or are they too tired? Is it too long a season?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, it has been a long season mentally, from a mental point of view. But if you go through the number of games that these players have played, they're not in the mid-30s or anything like that. They're probably in the early 20s, a lot of them. I don't have the exact numbers for every individual player, but mentally it's been a long season. I think the disappointments have more of an effect. So the World Cup would have been huge disappointment. Leinster losing last year to that final against La Rochelle at home. I think losing to lose this year, all that stuff does have an effect on the sports person. We know I'm not having a go at Leinster here. The vast majority of these players are Leinster players. The Munster players would be incredibly disappointed losing to
Glasgow.
To Glasgow as well in the semi-final of the URC. There was a potential final at home there from and we thought they had a great chance of going to win it. And Leinster again going to the Bulls. So there's been a number of disappointments. I think they have more of an effect on your of course they can drive you on to really be determined to get something and finish off on a high, but mentally they can be fatiguing. So look, I think Ireland will be able to regroup. I said it before last week. I still think we have a core group of a very good Irish team. There's a lot of top class, brilliant players there. Do we need more players? Will the transition happen after this tour? I think the transition will start with some, and that Andy Farrell will start giving more players opportunities, particularly come November, with a view to 2027.
No front row forwards as well. NIQ signed elsewhere on a very different topic of conversation.
Yeah,
but David Humphries coming out with that this morning. But I don't want to go to
let's see how that plays out. Let's see how that plays out. Non-Irish qualified props not being signed by Irish provinces anymore. It's a big call, We need more
depth from home, obviously. There you go.
Yeah,
easier said than done, I suppose. Yeah.
easier said than done. Where are they coming from? And hopefully they are coming through. And we do need to have more scrum clinics and more scrum development. And look, I know that stuff is going on all over the country. It's going on in every country, trying to bring players through. It's part of this the pathways to try and get more players. But historically, we haven't never produced a history and a raft of front row forwards on a consistent basis. And that's the point of South Africa. They can, if they get a couple of injuries in the front row, they can move around to even Currie Cup teams and get big, monstrous scrummaging forwards. They mightn't be have the same effectiveness around the field, but you're guaranteed to get strong scrummaging ability. But with the Springboks at the moment, they're probably the envy of most international teams with the depth they have. And Rassie, his coaches, South Africa, all those, the structures there, they deserve a lot of credit for that, because they've utilised and put their structures in place that are bringing through, and they've created this depth. So for Ireland, of course they have a chance. There's some very good players there. They have to go at it for 80 minutes, and they probably have to get, I've said this many times before, that 8 or 9 out of 10 performance right across the board from the team. It will need a massive collective effort from Ireland, and hopefully they can find chinks in the armour of South Africa, which are very obviously late on. They got a couple of chinks there, but I think South Africa down to 14 men maybe dropped the heads a little bit, felt the game was over, some of that stuff. But I think Ireland are capable of asking questions and causing South Africa some problems, and I would hope their attack is better. But again, you're coming up against the best team in the world. That's not disputed. It wasn't before last week. They are the best team in the world. They have the most depth. But I think Ireland will still have a shot here. And look, it can. If South Africa come out with the same anger and emotion and are actually better, and they're capable of doing it to anyone, they could make it really difficult for Ireland and punish them. But from an Irish point of view, I think there's one last surge in them, I think. And I'd be hopeful that, Gary Ringrose will give them a little bit of a different balance defensively and from an attacking point of view as well. But who knows? I think it's more hope than expectation.
Well, last predictions of the season as well, men. 4 games across the weekend, international games we'll be focusing on anyway. New Zealand, England, the Wallabies against Wales, Ireland, South Africa and Argentina. France, Matt, are you sticking with last week or are you mixing it up? Who's going to get the job done out of the 4?
I'm sticking with last week, Stu. The New Zealand were very, very good. England could have snatched it, but I thought they got the wrong end of the refereeing decisions there. And they're at Eden Park, need I say more. Last lost there in 1993. Wallabies in Melbourne, I think will do it. I think last week, 2 very ordinary teams, Stu. Two pedestrian teams, a class below France, Ireland, England and New Zealand, no doubt about that. But I think the shot in the arm for the Wallabies was huge last week. We believe it's going to be the same side, and Wainwright's out for Wales, so I think I'll do away with that. France have had an absolute disastrous tour despite winning the first test. Horrific off-field happenings over there, players sent home for sexual assault, racist comments. I mean, you can't believe what has happened over there. And I was very surprised at what occurred. And I think Felipe will get them together. But that tells you about the depth of French rugby as well. A third 15 can beat the Pumas in tuna. That's how much French depth they have. And Ireland, South Africa, look, I want Ireland to win. Champions get up when they can't. But really what this is, and we're only seeing this from the Irish side, this is the world champions bringing the trophy home and showing off their prowess to their people. And they are reveling in it. And like Alan said, you lose energy when you lose games, and Ireland's lost a lot of championship games, and you gain energy when you win games. And winning that World Cup, bringing it home in front of their people with roughly the same team, I think they'll have fun. They're just going to have too much. Ireland are so brave, you can't write them off. But if I had to put some money on it, which I don't, I'd put it on South Africa. I hate to say that, but that's just what I'm saying.
Alan, do you want to jump in there? Who are your teams to win?
Yeah, it's England caused New Zealand a lot of problems last week, and there's continuity in selection there. Scott Robertson's gone from the same team, and one change for England with Finn Baxter coming in for Joe Marler. New Zealand, you'd expect to be better, and England, to be fair, could go very close again and possibly could win that, but I probably lean toward New Zealand. I think New Zealand themselves will probably improve a bit there. But that should be a close game again. I think Australia beat Wales. There's a couple of changes. Liam Wright, the captain, is out. Valentini moves to blindside. Their back row, a bit of a reshuffle there. Charlie Cale is in it at number 8 for his debut. But I think Australia under Joe would have been a bit frustrated last week. And in fairness, Wales kind of complicated with their work rate and their effort. Wainwright missing for them. He was outstanding last week. Affects them. But you think Australia? I think I'm probably saying that all the teams last week will learn a little bit from a bit of rustiness and will be better. So we expect them to be better. I'd expect Australia to be better. I think. Who knows? But I think Australia, Ireland, South Africa, Ireland. Again, it'll take an incredible effort for Ireland to get a result here. I think. It's probably a step too far. But
South
I really
Africa to
hope
win by more than last week or less?
I don't know. It's probably around the same scoreline. They're 7 to 10 points better.
Okay.
And that's not being disrespectful to Ireland. I think, there's no point going through it again. Gibson Park's there. He gives them something incredibly different. I think Hugo Keenan, they're 2 world-class players. They're not in that team. Sheehan is out of it. So there's a couple of players missing there that would be really helpful to Ireland. But, I think South Africa will win that one. And I don't know what's going on with the French setup, because that was the second...
What's your language there, Alan?
Second string, third string French team. And it just shows the incredible depth they have with their top 14 and their Pro D2, the amount of players they have. So whether, they had a brilliant win against Argentina last week, they'll probably, win the game again. I said Argentina last week. It was the only one we predicted home win. So I'll go Argentina this week, given what happened in France. And I'm sure Felipe Contepomi has been pretty hard on his players this week. So New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Argentina.
Matt and Alan, thanks as always. We'll be back over the weekend to review the second test in Durban between Ireland and the World Cup champions.